Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Smarter Sourcing. My name is John Pavia, and today we're joined by Matthew Laud. He is the Director of Strategic Sourcing and Supplier Management at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You've had an interesting career and an interesting path getting to Memorial Sloan Kettering. And it's interesting to me in that the places you'd been prior to this were varied. And on top of that, I guess you had one healthcare related position before this, but you're at the epicenter of cancer research, cancer treatment, but you didn't necessarily start there. So I'd love for you to take our listeners and our viewers sort of through your journey and how you got there.
Yeah, thank you. You're taking me down memory lane here.
Yeah.
So I've always been in supply chain. I've been in supply chain for a little over 23 years. Started out in different industries, but mostly on the distribution, the warehouse side of it, and then eventually just worked my way up. But I started in rail yards. I started for your typical logistics company, some of your bigger ones out here in the nation, starting, my earlier days when I had a better back and more energy, working on forklifts and then getting my way up to operational management and really starting to learn supply chain management at that level. And then from there, just really wanted to start understanding more of the back office as I started working my way up, talking to different leaderships and different leadership positions. And if I could be honest with you, I wanted to get out of the cold. At this time, I was working in Minnesota, and working in a warehouse can be a little freezing. So I wanted to get more to the back office and start learning more of the business because I wanted to take a career path up. And that's when I took an opportunity to start working more in strategic sourcing and category management.
So that would be with the position with Merrill. Is that what brought you back there?
Yeah, I took an opportunity with a company called Merrill Corp. It was a company that handled a division of the company that handled mergers and acquisitions within the sourcing, supply chain, and procurement area. And what they would do is host different events, as they called it, where companies could look at each other confidentiality in terms of the acquisition, their assets, and et cetera. So I actually got up there as a sourcing and category management leadership there. That's where I started, actually in the back office and working my way through sourcing.
And what did you, was it something that you enjoyed, or did you say to yourself, okay, I found my calling, or not really?
No, it was absolutely something I enjoyed. It's one of the things where I actually got to start flexing my brain, if you will. It was one of the first times where I actually felt there was something up to a challenge. There were, the negotiations. That's when I started actually negotiating in sourcing events and contracts and getting involved into RFPs. And you're talking 16, 17 years ago. But that's when I really first started getting into that aspect of it. And it intrigued me in working with the executives and learning how to pitch a use case or proposition an argument with a vendor. And those things just, I don't know, it's something inside of it just kind of hooked me.
To the point where at some point you create your own consulting firm, right? On sourcing and procurement?
That's correct. Yeah, I started getting pretty good at it to where in that Twin Cities area, a lot of people don't know this, but there's a ton of Fortune 500 companies in the Minneapolis, Twin Cities area. And so it's small circles in terms of strategic sourcing and procurement supply chain. So running into a lot of people, started getting the question over and over, have you ever considered consulting? I could use somebody with their expertise over here if you're not interested in a full-time job. And after hearing enough people asking the question, could I start consulting? I looked into it and started my own consulting agency. And there I took on several different clients in the Twin Cities area, different industries that I wasn't typically into. At that time, it was more logistics driven, but then it allowed me, being a consultant, it allows you to kind of take that application of sourcing or procurement and start placing it in different industries almost immediately. So it gave me this rapid, almost rocket jetpack experience in different industries right away, ranging from Best Buy Corporation to Xcel Energy to Target Corporation.
Which one was the most complex out of those?
Target, by far. Xcel Energy had its own barriers because it was based around energy. There was a lot of governance and homeland security involved and stuff like that. But Target was the most difficult one because this actually took place at the same time. This is right after that first big data breach that was at Target Corporation in 2014 or so. This is before the big JP Chase Morgan one. All this, the first one was Target Corporation. So I was actually brought in on a special team of sourcing and procurement consultants to look into third-party agreements where they had to do investigation and remediation work to try to discover if or where the actual potential data breach was with some of our third-party vendors. So that one was difficult. It was literally like doing an investigation, if you will, like a crime scene, right? Trying to back into it, trying to figure out and follow crumbs. It was interesting, something I never done before or after that.
So you do this for a little over 3 years, and
Yes.
then you go into in-house at United Health Group. And I'm just curious, before we get to United Health, you're out there selling. I mean, you're selling your services. And I know in talking to a lot of other people in this business, coming in from the outside and then working with the in-house guys, sometimes that's the most difficult part because the in-house guys, some of them are great, but some of them are very territorial. And well, like the outside guys coming there to grade their homework. Did you find that?
Absolutely. So what I always call them, I refer to them as the gatekeepers, right? They're even a person like myself now sourcing. I'm kind of that first line gatekeeper from all these third party vendors just soliciting services. So I found myself running into that. But the way I got around it was networking. Honestly enough, I mean, the power of networking is incredible. So finding people in key positions that had a need that I would meet through these different round table events that I will go attend, these technology events, these sourcing, summits and stuff that the different corporations have, and meet people who had a distinctive need, and then right there, kind of at the spot, start pitching my solutions to how I would attack that issue for them and help them resolve that problem within their supply chain or their sourcing organizations. And from there, it just kind of took off. I will say, from Best Buy all the way to my current role, I never applied and I never looked. After that, it was recommendation after recommendation of companies calling me saying, hey, I heard you were the guy that did this at the former company. Can you do something similar to that here?
So after about 3 years of having your own consulting firm, you then make the jump and you go in-house at United Health Group. What was that like?
That was different, right? So after 3 years of consulting, making up your own hours, having a level of freedom to go back to a traditional 9 to 5, that was a culture shift, right? But the biggest one was I had never worked healthcare before. So that was probably the biggest shift, was trying to get my mind around now sourcing from a retailer perspective and something that was more, if I would say, money driven, to now looking into things that were more in the healthcare industry as an insurance provider. And then United Health Group also owns a subsidiary called United Healthcare that actually has clinicians and they actually do have patients. So you start looking more onto the physician side and the hospital almost side and clinical side. So having to shift the mindset of sourcing now to, if I will, provide services for patients versus trying to find a bottom dollar.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you. What was that transition where you're very focused on whatever the company goal is in the private sector, where it's for profit and not to say healthcare is not for profit, but it is being driven by, the management team's got to report to a board of directors and report their quarterly numbers and the whole 9 yards. And then you go work for, a massive healthcare organization like United Health. And you've got a dual mandate there. I mean, because now they have numbers they're concerned about also, but everything you do in terms of what the organization does is aligned. It has to be aligned towards providing great care to the patients.
Yeah, it was definitely something that was different, right? So to your point, right? Hospitals are still very much for profit. You need revenue, you need profit to generate the different types of services and care that you're going to provide. So they definitely are for profit. But there is that other side of the coin that you really don't have to worry about as much on the retail side, which is making sure you're hitting all the right notes for the patient. It's easy in retail because all you got to do is just make sure that you're selling the right product that gets the people in the doors, right? The Black Friday sales, all those things kind of create the buzz for you in terms of creating revenue. But on the patient side, on the healthcare side, you really have to make sure that not only is the company heading in the right direction, but the sourcing strategies are supporting the company's direction. And a company large like United Health Group, which a lot of people don't really dig into or know if you don't know, it's like a Fortune 3 or 4 company right now. It's a pretty large company. And United Health Group is made up of hundreds of acquired entities that make up the large conglomerate, which is United Health Group. So when you're sourcing, enterprise sourcing, you're not sourcing across one organization, you're sourcing across multiple hundreds of different companies with their own sourcing teams, their own categories. And when you're over the enterprise sourcing, you're having to make sure that all those different pieces have a level of alignment. So it was very complex.
You're there for 3 years, and then you finally get to where you are today, Memorial Sloan Kettering. Phenomenal organization, phenomenal reputation. Tell us about your role there.
My current role right now is Director of Strategic Sourcing and Supplier Management. So my teams and myself run the day-to-day in terms of the tactical side. My team's oversight is around the contract management portion, the sourcing, the RFPs, vendor selections, and then the supplier optimization. So you're talking about, the resiliency. You're talking about the making sure we're selecting correct vendors in terms of diversity, asset management, and then from there, we kind of start getting into more my role, which is the director of. So my role is more looking at the larger strategy of, and making sure that my teams are in alignment with the larger strategy, working with our executives at the company. And the biggest change for me going from United Health Group to Memorial Sloan Kettering is my role is more almost of a translator, working with a lot of the C-suite and even some boards, some minor boards of directives and for some attending physicians, is that you almost have to be the translator of what the value is of sourcing and supply chain management, what it equates to them and what that means. So really starting to get more into the terminology of and having to be able to tell the story. That was something that was a big change, right? Having to be able to tell the story and sell our services more.
So that's really what I wanted to get to in the time we have together, because I was looking through some of your posts and whatnot, and you had a great one where you actually commented on someone else's post, and I thought it was sort of funny, but actually I thought pretty on point. And it was a post by someone else that had a bunch of superheroes sitting around a table, and you said this is exactly what procurement is, what it's like, and it starts off and it gets to a comment. Those who truly stand out in procurement are individuals, and they list a bunch of things. And I want to ask you, and one of them you had, be able to communicate at an elite level, both with empathy and influence. And I think that's what you're talking about right now, really being able to communicate, understand the terminology of procurement and being able to communicate it. But you said something just there about storytelling and telling a great story. And I think that's so important as I talk to people, because in the procurement world, you've got a bunch of constituents, and one of your biggest one, maybe your biggest one, is your stakeholders. Sometimes they're the hardest ones to bring along on the journey when it comes to really good procurement.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? And then I don't know what your experience is in terms of working with physicians, but that's one of the toughest crowds to have to bring along the journey. And I'm not saying that in a way that's any negative, but their job is literally saving lives. So you have to tell the story in a way of what services sourcing plays that gives them the trust to say that, okay, we will put this into your hands. We will trust you to get this executed on time and to deliver this product or this tool or this medicine in a timely fashion that's going to save these lives. Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to the patients, right? That's what they're caring about. So you have to speak their terminology. If you come to them speaking procurement or sourcing or supply chain terms, cost savings and optimization and all this, goes one ear off the other. The bottom line is, can you get this for me and how soon? So how to tie those together, that's where you have to learn to tell the story. And that's where you have to bring in this, what you said, empathy. And what made it easy for me at Memorial Sloan Kettering is it's the mission. The mission is to eradicate cancer forever. I don't know anybody that I've ever met that hasn't been impacted by cancer in some way, shape, or form, whether it was a pet, your loved one, a friend, or somebody you knew, or someone on TV that you felt a connection with. Everybody's had some sort of level of relationship of cancer, had been impacted by cancer. So for me, it was easy to draw that kind of personal emotion to tie it to the mission of the overarching organization that the physicians really focus on, and tie the procurement and the sourcing into that brought us to a plane where we had some sort of equilibrium and an agreement where we can really work together. We had built this level of trust.
Do you think your position, your time at UHG, better prepared you for the mission or understanding the mission at Memorial Sloan?
It did. It's funny you said that. I always look at United Health Group as that first stepping stone, right? Because it was like a 50-50 where it was very heavy bent on profits and money. And then also there was that flip side of having to care for the patients So when I go to somewhere like a Memorial Sloan Kettering where it is patients first, right? They're still focusing on the dollar. They're still focusing on trying to optimize revenue. But really, the bottom line is patience. It was that transition that got me there. If it wasn't for that, it would have probably been a difficult transition. But that really was the stepping stone that prepared me. And the thing that really drew was the sale that pushed me over was actually taking a visit when I joined Memorial Sloan Kettering to an actual hospital, seeing the patients. And then you go into these rooms and you actually see the things that you sourced. You see the teams, what the teams went through, how to get these things in here, what they're actually doing, and how to impact the patient. It hits you right here, and it starts to make things connect on that level to now where you can translate at a higher level to what these physicians and a lot of these different C-suite representatives in the stakeholder areas are looking for in terms of a conversation and understanding how we can take this forward. Because when you see these things, you say, oh, that, 3 months arguing with this vendor or working on this category strategy, it was worth it in the end because you see the impact it has in this room. So you were able to connect the dots and really draw from it.
I love those stories where no matter how big the company is, no matter how big the executive is that gets hired, that they have to spend a certain amount of time out in the field, just, whether it was like Dish Network, where I remember the new CFO had to go and spend time on a truck, going out with installers and whatnot. I love stuff like that. So I want to pivot a little bit here because there were some other comments in this post that I thought were really interesting. And it's funny because I was at an event last week and I got to, just by chance, sit next to a guy who was retired. And this is not the first time this has happened. When guys get out of the CIA and their career's over, they can then just say nonchalantly, after spending a lifetime denying where they worked. I said it was next to the gentleman who went from the CIA into law enforcement into New York City. And the other night we were at this dinner and he said, yeah, he'd been 29 years in the CIA. And we got to talking. He talked about the profile of the person who can go into the CIA. And it was funny because in some of these comments were, what does it take to really be good at procurement and work in a large procurement organization? A couple of things it said here was, you got to be comfortable rarely being in the spotlight or getting praise. And then another one was consistently deliver results without chasing recognition. It reminded me of my conversation with this guy because he was talking about how you just got to be of that ilk where you could be doing something like you feel like you're saving the world, but you got to be okay with not getting any recognition.
Absolutely. I always call it the unsung hero, right? And what I mean by that is everything you do is in the background. Most people across an organization really doesn't even really know what sourcing does. They don't really know what a supply chain organization really does. They think of it as category management, cost savings, where I go to get something. But there's so much more complexity to a sourcing organization, so many different things that we're trying to achieve that support the underlying business as a whole. But to your point, you have to be in a mindset, especially in the leadership position, that you're never probably ever going to get the recognition or praise from that. That's not where you draw your energy from. I kind of look at it as almost like a coach on a any sports team. The athletes are out there doing all the work. You got the different people on the fields or the court, whatever your sport is. The coach, even though he came up with a lot of that plan, it's executed by other people. You necessarily are never going to get the recognition of getting that game-winning shot or score, but you still have that level of fulfillment saying, hey, I drew that up. I brought these players together. I did this or I did that. So I get the fulfillment knowing that the job was done. I get the fulfillment knowing that something was created or developed that brought more efficiency or an opportunity to create more revenue, especially right now in the current climate in healthcare where, you got the costs going up and down from different things, geopolitical with tariffs and, cancer research being cut. So you find ways to try to help the company sustain and be more resilient. That's where I get my biggest draw of positivity from fulfillment in the job. It's not necessarily getting praise saying, hey, good job, you guys.
How about this one? To be successful in sourcing procurement, you have to thrive in ambiguity, making sound decisions with incomplete information. I'm like, oh, that's interesting because a lot of, especially on the indirect side, I think a lot of it, there's a lot of incomplete information.
I'd say most of it's incomplete, right? It's a lot of it's tying the knots together and trying to figure out things. It's almost like filling in the dark, but you become very well versed over time of being able to find your way in the dark. But I would say that particular one it's accurate, right? I mean, your whole world in sourcing, and for the most part, starts at a level of ambiguity, even from the request level from the business itself. It's never complete. The story's never there. It's very vague, usually high level. And from there, you have to develop it all the way through to a full baked execution plan and contract and then full into the sourcing, the cycle, right? But from there, there's a lot of discovery that has to happen. There's a lot of alignment that has to happen. There's a lot of strategic initiatives that need to be checked with executives, budgets that need to be agreed upon and approved before you could do anything. And just to flesh all that out, you start in ambiguity, but at the end of the day, you have a complete puzzle.
So I want to go back to Memorial Sloan and how you really measure your vendor partners. And in a place like Memorial Sloan, where the work you're doing there and that the doctors are doing are just so critical. When you're evaluating suppliers for a cancer treatment center like Memorial Sloan, what separates your good vendors from your great partners?
Good question. For me, a good vendor is someone who fits the need of what the business is looking for, right? I mean, there's a product or something like that. To me, that's just a good vendor, right? You got what we need when we need it. I think that's pretty clear, cut and dry. But to make a great partner is different. That's more of when, what can you do for me? What is it that you supply me with that's above and beyond that makes us want to build a larger footprint with you? Whether it's a technology you create that gives us the edge in terms of market competitivity or competitiveness, or is it something where you're providing a service to us that's going to allow us to have more insight with our patients? So for me, it's going above and beyond the typical request of what this engagement is in terms of our relationship as you, the vendor, and us, the customer. That's what makes it great for me, is saying, hey, we have something new here that we just rolled out. We want you to have this, and out of good faith, we want you to have this at this price or for free, right? That's going to be able to help support this. So we came up with a new solution for that. Or, hey, because you guys have been good customers with us on this past multi-year agreement, going forward, we're actually going to lower our rate in terms of how much we're going to charge you year over year. So having that flexibility to allow us to now have a cost savings to provide more money to execute more on the patient side. That to me is what makes a great partner versus a good vendor.
And how do you balance that? And maybe this is probably no different no matter who you're sourcing for, but just talk to us a little bit about balancing cost and cost cutting, cost savings with quality and performance fulfillment.
Really how that's done. And this is right? This is a big if. It's a little more tough if you don't have this, but if you have category management installed, that makes it a lot easier. Because in category management, at least in the sourcing world, what you can do now is you have typically that landscape of what that category is. Say if you're taking something like, I don't know, project portfolio management tools, right? PPM tools. You can see that, hey, we have several of these different tools. And by that, based off of scorecards and year over year, reaching out to the different users and stakeholders, you can see which ones are actually good partners based off the scores that they're getting in terms of, hey, maybe they're giving us great support. We love their tool. They work with us. The tool has a lot of capability. You can start looking at those things and start deducing whether or not that this is a good partner versus just a good vendor, meaning they have a good solution that fits our need. So really managing the category, working with the stakeholders, scorecards, quarterly business reviews of our vendors, doing due diligence, RFPs. What I mean by that is even with your existing suppliers, going back and re-putting them to bid to make sure that they're always putting their best foot forward, pushing them to drive their technology or their product to a better place. That's how you make sure that you're looking at that balance between, or that's how you calculate that balance between, is by managing the category.
So when you get to technology, and a little bit of a pivot here, but in terms of evaluating, because I think right now it's got to be hard because you guys are getting hit with, everybody's got a new shiny toy, and there's a lot out there to look at, to consider. And a lot of these folks, a lot of these providers who have the newest shiny toys, they haven't been around that long. So it's something that it's hard to evaluate, what's the track record of this company if they're just, a couple of years old. So how are you managing, the evaluation of some provider or some new system that is being pitched to you as a great new piece of AI or data analytics tool? How do you go about that assessment?
So one of the first things that I always recommend my teams to do, it's one of our, I would say it's almost protocol, is we hit the market. We work with different vendors that we use for benchmark analysis and just get some feedback on particular vendors, on where they're heading, what the footing is, customers, stuff like that. But the main thing is really just putting them to the test, right? That would be through an RFP. If there's really a drive, or there's a demand from our business, our stakeholders, to want this tool, then that's when we actually hold a formal RFP, where we look for other vendors that are either currently existing or in the market that are similar. Say if it's a new emerging tool like an AI, that's when you start putting them against some of the larger corporations and some of the smaller corporations in an RFP. And that's when you can really get down into the vetting. I mean, really become picky and splitting hairs on, can you do this? Can you do that versus this and that? And that allows you to really vet the vendor and their capabilities. And if it is sustainable for your company's or that team's specific strategy, long-term or short-term strategy.
Last few minutes here, but I definitely wanted to get to this one. Because I know you've been a strong advocate for diversity and inclusion throughout your entire career. How does diverse leadership strengthen any organization, but in particular a procurement organization?
I think it's super important and impactful in many ways. I look at diversity and inclusion on two different fronts. Not only are from the internal on the teams and the leadership, but I think it's strong also from the actual vendors that support our patients, that they also be as equally as diverse as the patients that they are supporting. So for me, diversity and inclusion goes beyond that. It also goes into the supplier and diversity. So there's diversity in thought, there's diversity in your background, there's diversity geologically where you come from across the world. And bringing those together, it just gives you a larger perspective. It pulls things together, and it's almost like this big aha moment when you do it right, where you say, hey, there's a lot that we've been leaving on the table because we've been just thinking in this very traditional mindset of this is what this should look like and this is who this should look like. But when you actually start opening the doors, and dare I say, be bold enough to empower someone or empower a vendor of a diverse nature, whether that be ethnicity or, they're a veteran or a woman, it really goes a long way. I think people have to get past some of these societal conditionings that, somebody has to be a certain age to do something, or somebody has to be a certain gender. You'd be surprised. I know I have. I've been surprised many times in my life, and I've never not seen myself get surprised on the capabilities of different individuals, where they come from, their backgrounds, et cetera, and what they can do. So having that diversity it's powerful. It's just makes your outreach stronger. It makes your perspective wider. It's hard to explain without getting too passionate, but it matters. It matters, and it makes a very big impact.
Do you do much work at any colleges or universities that have sourcing and procurement curriculum?
Just not even sourcing and procurement in general. I actually am a mentor for a lot of different colleges where they have programs where they bring in future professionals that are current students at HBCUs and different universities as well across the country. And what they do is they link them with people like me to try to understand what are some of the skills that they would need coming out of college that would be beneficial or attractive to somebody like me who's looking to hire a young professional. And where can they start? And then after that, there's a level of where there's coaching in terms of development. So absolutely, that's one of my favorite things to do, actually, even more so than sourcing, is mentoring and coaching the next generation.
And where do you these days? Where do you look for talent? And I ask that question because when I talk to people, sourcing, procurement, supply chain management becoming more and more popular at schools. There's more and more schools offering this as a focused curriculum. But how about you? Where are you looking? What are some programs that you really like?
Any and everywhere, honestly. I don't really look for a particular program. I mean, there are certain programs that I think that develop certain, I wouldn't say programs, certain areas, honestly. I feel like develop really sharp procurement people more than some other areas just because of the type of procurements that's there. When they talk about corporate procurement or supply chain or healthcare, that Twin Cities area is one of the best places to go because it's so large in healthcare. And then when you're looking at technology, I look for people who are coming out of college or just early budding in careers out of the Bay Area in California. Or if I'm looking for somebody in the financial market, I look in the New York City area. So really I found it to be more geographical. So I'm one of those people where I'm not necessarily looking for a butt in a seat where they have to be in that location to where the company's at. I'm looking just for the best talent. So whether that be remote or stationary, I'm just looking for the best talent where I can get them for that particular need of that individual I'm looking for.
Well, Matthew, this has been great. We're out of time, but I really appreciate your time. Your passion for this comes through, both for what you do and for what you do for the patients at Memorial Sloan and also the people that you're mentoring. So I really I applaud you and really enjoyed having you on.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you. This was fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I hope all our listeners and viewers enjoyed it as well. We'll see you for our next episode on Smarter Sourcing. Take care.